Okay, so we are live now.
Yeah.
Lovely. Hello. Welcome to Tanya Talkies. Today is a super special episode. I think we should have done a guest reveal, huh? I can't believe we didn't do the guest reveal. Like, I wish I had the spotlight feature on. And can you hear this as well?
Yeah.
Okay, superb. So I was hoping that we would have done the guest reveal and then I would have had, you know, my guest for tonight just come up on screen and just, hey, come up with a fancy introduction. But yes, today I'm joined by a very cherished writer. She is also a musician. She comes with worlds of experience. She's in fact a college senior, and it's so lovely to connect with her. I am joined today by Trivarna. I will pass on the mic to her super quickly because I would want her to just introduce herself to the chat and let you guys know what got her into writing such deep, absolutely memorable pieces of writing. So over to you, Ravana.
Thank you. First of all, I'm delighted to be able to join you on this wonderful podcast of yours. Such a lovely exchange of words. And I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to also greet and meet all of you who've joined this live chat and are going to be listening in on this. Thank you for your time. Um, okay, so I'm Trivarna Hariharan, and I am an English literature graduate. I completed my MA in English literature just 2 years ago, and I also happen to be a poet and a keyboardist and a pianist. And You asked about my love for literature. What brought me into it? Was that your
Yeah.
question? Okay, so ever since I can remember anything about myself, I've been wanting to read. I don't even remember a life without the experience of reading, I guess. Just being and reading are kind of entwined for me. And reading is a way of living, if one, looks into it like that. It's a way of living your life. What is the point of reading if it's not impacting the way you form your relationships to the world around you and to the people around you? And so it's been like that for me. It's everything, really. And To think about it, what brought me into it, uh, there's a part of me that goes to reading for not understanding. I mean, the usual perception about reading is that you gain knowledge, right? But that's one part of it. And I think the deeper function of being a reader and being immersed in literature is that you go deep into things you do not know and that you can never possibly know. That for me is the real thrill of literature. And to be specific, the real thrill of poetry, because poetry for me embodies mystery. There's no neat answers in poetry. There's no conclusions. I love the lack of finality, which is why I think I keep getting drawn back and back into it. I like the fact that there are no answers because in life, you're always being hurled answers. So I want to go into a place where nobody's going to give me any answers because that heals me more than definitive answers. So I think that's the reason that I got into it. And then, of course, in college, my love for it was just redoubled. That's also such an interesting space to be in conversation with different texts at the same time. You're reading one text in the light of another. It's also, so if anyone follows my Instagram page here, you'd know that that's precisely what I do on my page as well. It's different poets and authors in conversation with each other, a dinner table conversation. Like I was chatting I was telling Tanya a couple of minutes ago. It's like that. It's bringing voices together. It's what these voices have to say to each other, and via that, what they have to say to you. So it's this multi-level, I don't know, this multi-layered, multi-directional conversation that I really enjoy.
That is so nice to hear. Honestly, I mean, when I spoke to Trivarna for the first time, I talked about, yes, college being a commonality and just having a great expressive space for all of us where we can just come and say all the shit in the world and not be you know, like told twice about it. I think nobody tells you off in a college as liberal as ours, right? I
Right.
wanted to, on that note, seriously take your opinion on this because you're so creative. And they say that creative people who are musicians, who are artists, they are usually night owls. I wanted to ask you, has that also been like a motivation for you? Firstly, say yes or no. Let me know if that's right. Have I assessed you correctly as a night owl? If not, what is the best time for you to go about writing poetry? And when do you actually try and channelize all that onto a piece of paper?
So you were spot on. On the first point, I am a
Yay!
night owl. I'm nocturnal.
High
They say
five!
high five. I almost get FOMO when I sleep at night. I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of stuff, a lot of important stuff. I don't even know what it is about the night time, but it feels like a time where anything is possible. There are boundaries that dissolve. It just is also sort of a time warp in the sense that in a painting, if you see, especially like in a watercolor painting, the colors tend to dissolve after a point and blur into almost like a trance like state where you cannot differentiate purple from blue from black, etc. Night is like that for me. It's a time when I cannot tell one thing from the other, and I enjoy that. Somehow things become clearer, paradoxically, in that state of blur and not knowing. And that's naturally conducive to poetry, to thinking, to writing, right? And let me also say that I'm kind of afraid of the dark, but when I mean afraid, I also mean I enjoy the dark. So fear and thrill kind of go hand in hand for me. Like there's this experience of everybody's asleep, and also the sensation that anything might happen, not in a literal sense, but in a metaphorical way. Um, and there's also a slight fear because there's nobody around that's really awake, or very few people around that are awake. It's entirely silent. And so the nighttime is also kind of a mirror for me in the sense that I look into it and then I'm able to come through my fears. Uh, and poetry is not an evasion of fear. Poetry is about the process of what you discover when you delve into fear. Because the thing at the bottom of fear is not fear itself, it's something else. It's almost magical. It cannot be explained. It's just transports you into another realm when you confront the thing that you're afraid of. And I think that the night time helps you do that the best. Not that I recommend writers and poets to stay up late and miss out on sleep. I mean, do whatever. I have known people who work better in mornings as well. So just in case anybody's tuned in and listening to this, I think you should do whatever works for you the best, though.
Yes. No, but that's such a good way of looking at it. God, honestly, I mean, just looking and facing your fear right in the eye, looking at it
Right.
headstrong, I think that's the best way of going about it. In fact, I think because our topic and our theme for tonight is, discussing all things poetry, Rabindranath Tagore has written this one poem that has, I think, stuck with me for the longest time, right? He says that when the head is held high and the mind is without fear, have you read that poem of his?
Yes, absolutely. That's his
What what
most
what do you
popular.
think? Yeah, exactly. It's a very popular one. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. There was a Netflix series also on the kind of stories of
Correct.
Tagore.
Correct.
But
You're
yeah,
absolutely right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. We used to say that as a prayer in our school meets, actually.
same. Oh my God, I think it was the same for us. School, right?
Correct. School. Yeah. It's So I think the first memory that actually comes to mind is almost like, now that you say it, this chorus of voices together chanting these words out as a hymn to God. That's my first memory, my first sensation of where the head is held high and the mind is without. I'm sorry if I'm, not misquoting it in any way, but it's something like that. I think it's I think what for me strikes about this poem or any other poem of substance is the fact that you use words as vehicles to take you to a place beyond words. That's the sensation that and especially now, because my memory of this particular poems got so merged with this poem being a prayer, so maybe I'm also coming at it from that place. But I think when done right, every poem can be a prayer. That's also a lesson that you learn from this, is that the words just take you to a place of wordlessness, almost like a
Right.
right. It's that place of, I wouldn't say fearlessness, because that sounds almost like you're superhuman. I think that's not what Tagore is trying to do.
Yeah.
Takes you to a place of cleansing, let me put it this way, where it's beyond the words, but it's also not a feeling of you feeling like you're superhuman. You're still
Hmm.
very much human. You're right up there at the apex of things, but you're also the most grounded that you can be. So it's both of those at the same time.
Right. On that note, I just so want to cue like Top of the World by Carpenters. And then the lines go and I'm sure as a keyboardist, you know this as well. I'm on the top of the
Right,
world.
right,
Looking
right, right.
down on
Correct.
creation, and the only explanation I can find. I think we should have a singing, like a
How
whole
lovely.
medley thing going on here.
Yeah, you sing. I cannot sing.
Then I'll ask you to like be my keyboardist for the day. Just give me an A minor, a G, and then we'll just
Yeah, I wish I had here, but you sang really well.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah.
I was so super keen to actually get into diagnosing and dissecting that one poem that has just been, that's kept you awake at night, right? Because already you've told us that you're a night owl, and I'm sure there's something that's fueling your creative energy. So what is that for you? Like, is it a poem? Is it a work of literature? Anything, anything that motivated you? Or like first year of college, what was it that you picked up and you're like, hey, this is my epiphany moment?
For poetry, right? For writing, you mean?
Yeah, writing in general. I mean, anything that just moves you.
It's different things at different points, and I'm sure you relate to
Fair
that.
enough. Yeah.
Um, Correct. It depends on your state of mind. I tend to veer between two states of mind. So there's one in which, so say if I'm going through a certain emotional phase, say it's happiness, so say it's grief, there are two things that can potentially work. You either veer completely away from that state and do the opposite thing. So, say you're happy, or say, let's say you're in a state of grief, and then you go into something that's just humorous and requires no real emotional, no deep emotion, intense emotional investment from you, and that
Yeah.
can work. Or you're in that state and you delve even deeper into that state in order to uncover what that means for you. It can go either way. So for me, the thing that comes first is emotion and what I'm feeling. Like, feeling for me comes even before words, and I try to then maneuver my life around that and to see how best I can bring that out on paper.
Fair enough.
So it could be, yeah, if I'm in that state, then I sometimes read the works of Virginia Woolf.
Yeah.
uh,
Oh Lord. We both like her. I think
yeah,
another
absolutely.
commonality apart from Elisa here would be our love for Virginia Woolf.
Right.
Because I think even before the stream started, and we bring this up for the audience as well, we were talking about how at such a early age he succumbed to the years and years of depression that she was battling. And we said the same about a few more writers, poets as well. I mean, I wanted to take your opinion here and take a quick pause, see if if there's somebody in the chat as well who wanted to maybe share this with us. That why is it that so many creative geniuses, like I've seen this so often, and we say that about these industries as well, which have too many eyeballs on them, like the whole world's attention is on you, right? My question for you would be two-part. One would be to take your understanding here and see that what do you think is the reason for this? Is it that we're not talking about mental health enough? Is that a completely ignored topic? That's number one. And number two, have you personally ever felt that, yeah, I mean, talking about these things and being vocal about it is the best solution, right? So that would be something I'd take your opinion on as well.
Correct. Very important questions. To begin with, the first one, I do not possibly think that we're talking about it enough. I also think sometimes that that's not by choice. Sometimes the stakes are so high, not just socially or culturally, but also emotionally for yourself, to bear yourself in that manner publicly, or even to the closest of your friends. Sometimes the stakes are just too high for you to be entirely vulnerable. Sometimes not talking about it can also be a way of preserving that part of yourself that's so dear and sacred to you. So that's one. We're not talking about it enough. And when it is talked about, it's not always received in the best possible light.
True.
There often is a lot of backlash against it. Folks are even unfortunately and tragically shamed for talking about their mental health. And I mean, I think it would help to have a more inclusive community space. I mean, it's not that it's not happening. I think we are living in much better times than Virginia Woolf, than Sylvia Plath. It's incredibly tragic that they had to go through what they did without adequate support. But today we have communities that are just meant to tackle and talk about mental health, which is fantastic. Today there's conversation happening on social media. Today people are using even social media productively to put put it. There are so many accounts that promote that talk about mental health openly, that promote body positivity, that promote mental psychological positivity, and it's fantastic that it's happening. And I do think that we all must become mirrors for each other. I think it's about that. Um, it's it's about it's about seeing each other. uh, that's what makes all the difference. There is no such thing as, like I even said before, a final answer, because life is a constant process of evolution. One cannot say that there is a certain stage in your life you reach where everything will be absolutely all right. It's constantly, it's a constant up and down, like those little, I don't know, riffs on music that you see. It's constantly popping up and down. It's like that. But when you know that you have a safety net of people mirroring you, and people just being there to say that no matter what, you are enough, I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing in our society in today's day and age, in my sort of understanding, is that people are not feeling enough for whatever reason that may be. And to simply say that just where you're standing is absolutely enough, while also acknowledging that person's drive to move forward, I think would be just fantastic. That kind of, that stage where you balance both of those things. What was your second question? I'm sorry, I completely
Just wanted to understand a little better, like, I think you've done the needful. You did tell us about how there's so many social media pages, how
Right.
people are using social media positively. But are there any other ways? Like, do people reach out to you? Like on your page on Instagram? Like, so for people, in fact, who are watching and liking, you must, like, I insist, this is my Tanya Talkie recommendation of the week, perhaps, because a lot of people ask me that, hey, what are you reading? And I'm just like, hey, at the moment, let me come up with like a smart answer. But tonight, I have to tell the audience that I actually was so involved in just going through and brushing up on like poems and things that Trivarna had dropped in our personal exchanges on WhatsApp. And I was like, oh gosh, I gotta impress her. I gotta let her know that this girl here is reading as well. But yeah, I mean, if somebody does reach out to you on like Instagram or anywhere on social media, how do you go about responding to them? Like, is it do you come across hate? Any hate?
Thankfully, not so much.
Okay.
Thankfully, not so much.
Good to
Though
know.
there is some, but I really can't complain because 90% of the people who are on my page and who do read all of these wonderful authors are, touchwood, incredibly empathetic, compassionate people. They get what the author's trying to say. They
Yeah.
do not misread all of that. So I'm very lucky. Sometimes when I put up there's some little bit homophobia around, but it's so minimal, and it happens, of course, when I put up a queer author's work, or especially highlighting that person's work. And it's unfortunate that even that 10%, but I mean, that's something that really I feel like it's not in one's hands at all. It's I mostly tend to block like homophobic
Yeah.
stuff. uh,
Absolutely. As you should.
yes. So apart from that, it's mostly touchwood, very, very understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, instead of getting touchy-feely about it, and many a times, like I get this comment. I hear this so often, like this very statement or this narrative that, hey, just because you're turning a blind eye towards hate on social media doesn't mean that you're gonna become a better person or like exonerate yourself. But hey, listen, honestly, like I'm doing my best in the world. It
Right.
is up to you. It is actually not up to you. Actually, it is up to me to
Right.
decide whether I'm worth something or not. Like I'm here to prove my mettle and no one else. Like, there's some people in the chat. I'm gonna flag those comments as well. Like the usuals are here. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. We've got about 17 odd people watching us. They're watching live, even when it goes, on YouTube and
Hi
people
to everybody
tune
who's
into
watching
this.
right now.
Hello. I feel like I do these quick check-ins so often. So most of the times,
what
I
are the
think my
what are the
audience,
comments? Yeah, what are the
I'm going to
comments?
read some of them out. I feel like I did see, okay, one of them is definitely my brother, who's put in some very inane things in the chat. He's written very
Okay.
informative. It seems like a very planted, like a planted person in the chat. So we're going to ignore what he has sent. So Dhruv
Okay.
is actually my brother.
Okay.
Pokraj, he is someone who's tuned into our chats with Vaani, with other creators very often. I always see you. That's very nice. He's written that not much has changed, but we've come a long way. I think this is about our discussion about mental health earlier on, what we talked
Yeah.
about. Kanav Kapoor, he's also a friend. In fact, he's mentioned something that we have come a very, very long way. And there are a lot of internal chats. I think everybody's just
Right.
speaking to each other while we are here making a conversation, which is super delightful.
Great.
I'll move on to one quick thing that Trivarna had mentioned, and I want to really flag it. Like it struck me for the longest time. I was just hoping that, hey, I'm going to make a quick note of it, put it up on that board right there for myself. Because you said that we all have to mirror ourselves because
Right.
nothing seems new under the sun, right? I feel like we're all bits and pieces of everything we do is from drawn from people, from experiences that we've had, right? From all walks of life. And we piece ourselves together as this one strong, tall human being. But at the same time, I feel like it must be reminded to every single person that nothing remains original. Like everybody has influenced the other person in their life, positively, negatively, but has had some influence. Um, for you, have you read, the poem Mirror by Plath? Does this have a similar analogy as to what I said or different?
Same and different, I think both, but I'm really interested that you chose to bring in mirror at this point. Similar and different. I think maybe we can start with what you think, and then I'll echo in with what I think, or do you want me to start? I don't know.
Go, do the honors. Go for it.
Okay.
Our audience is so excited. Everybody wants to hear you.
I think they equally want to hear you too. Um, I think, but with Mirror especially, the first time that I read it, I was in school. So we had this in our NCRT textbooks,
Right.
if I'm not wrong. And
Yeah.
it was our teacher kept saying personification,
Oh God.
and because that's the theme or the main motif of the poem.
Yeah.
But today, when I look back at it, I find that it's a poem in which I discover something new every time I revisit it.
Yeah.
um
Do you think it'll be a
what.
good idea? Sorry, I'm gonna butt in real quick. Do you think it'll be a good idea if I just screen share? I'll open up
Absolutely,
the poem for
absolutely, always
everyone
great.
and let's see how we go with this. But yeah, there we go. Do let me know if you can see it. I've tried to
Yes,
zoom in
yes,
as much
yes.
as possible. Yeah, you were saying. Sorry, go ahead. Like, but NCRT, you're right, है ना? NCRT में
Correct,
this is how we were introduced to it. And
correct.
I did a mini game with like the chat last time. I was like telling them, hey, what Cynic Doki is, what personification is, what these different literary tools look like. And I think half the crowd just left the chat. They're just like, what is happening here? So if you were to explain to a lay person, right, somebody who's from a non-literature background, what would be your reading like here? Like maybe explain to me. Let's have that conversation. Like, do you see any literary devices at the very get-go?
Okay, so see, when you talk about personification, that's another thing that I want to put out there to everybody who's listening also. It's a very tricky space to say that I'm going to embody the voice of a voiceless thing. First of all, it's a very tricky space, because how do you even do that without filtering that object through your own subjectivity? So nothing is ever entirely personified. Uh, okay, I think that's okay. It's here. It's back. Um, Nothing is ever entirely personified or voiced from the voice of something that's outside of you, because the inner experience of the person speaking it is always present. So if Tanya, you write about the keyboard that's lying right next to you,
Yeah.
that's not just going to be the voice of the keyboard, it's going to be the voice of the keyboard as filtered by Tanya. So there's multiple levels of voices already in there, inherent in what's happening, right? So this is not just a mirror as we were taught in school, or at least as I was taught in school. This is Sylvia Plath's speaker as the mirror. So that's the first thing that I think is important to keep in mind. I'm silver and exact. I have no preconceptions. Whatever I see, I swallow immediately, just as it is, unmisted by love or dislike. So, this whole idea of swallowing up something uh, is, of course, a mirror swallows up exactly what it sees, but it's also something that can be extended to a human being, right? Even human beings can swallow up stuff that they see. It goes back to something that we were discussing just 5 minutes ago, the idea of mirroring each other and seeing each other, and how people are
Yeah.
made up of fragments of each other. if we did
Absolutely.
not if we did not swallow up stuff from each other, I mean, of course, I mean this in a larger metaphorical sense, swallow up each other's grief, each other's emotions. You try to spend time with somebody for 40-45 minutes, you would have absorbed something from them emotionally. It always happens by default. And so it's that sense of imbibing and absorbing that not just belongs to this voiceless, lifeless mirror, but also to a living, breathing human being. So the
Yeah.
human being is the mirror here, right? um, I'm not cruel, only truthful, the eye of a little god. Most of the time I meditate on the opposite.
Another alarm. I'm super sorry for that. Tonight. Yeah, sorry to break your flow. Go on, go on.
I also find it interesting that a mirror can swallow up, because the word swallow brings up hunger in my mind. It's a very visceral sensation.
Right.
It's almost like devouring something. I never really thought of a mirror as something that has a human sensation or a human kind of visceral feeling. So I'm really intrigued by what Plath is also doing here, and the ways in which he's trying to reframe the way we look at voiceless objects around us
Right.
as living, breathing beings, as things that have desires, that have
And at the
hunger.
same time, because she's written, and you might see this in the line, she says that the eye of a little god. How
Right.
how at the pedestal of the very Almighty, Like this, it's insane how the word choice has been, It also reminds me of something else. Sorry, I'm going to take 2 seconds to talk about this. Is this Shelley who wrote the one where the visage of Ozymandias, the Egyptian king, is also part of our syllabus. Again, there was a similar kind of personification or synecdoche, perhaps you'll have to correct me here. But how it's been seen as larger than life. Like the passage of time is something that we talked about, not the king whose monument was then sort of broken.
Correct. No, absolutely. That's another good example. Who cited that poem?
I think P.B. Shelley, if I'm not wrong.
You said somebody brought it up in the comments, right?
No. I just had this thought because we talked about NCRT, like poetry in general, and NCRT did infuse good poems in their curriculum.
That's true. No, so you're right. Ozymandias does have a very similar theme. And also the sense of, with Ozymandias, with the sense of something living on long after it's dead, right? Because it's about that person and the ways in which people continue to haunt us, even in their rigid monumentality, I think.
And why would you say haunt? Sorry, why do you use the word haunt here?
Because, also because anything that's long gone actually continues more than the present itself.
Fair enough. Because earlier too, you had spoken about fear. And I wanted to bring us back to that, conversation and maybe you sharing a little more about that. I'm sorry I just cut you off, but I wanted to hear more about your take on that. Like when somebody comes up to you and tells you that, hey, there is a certain challenge that I've been facing in my life, or perhaps you get to know about that challenge that they have, or like a fear that's been bothering you for a long time. Like, what's your first instinct? Like in my first stream, I spoke about a flight and fight syndrome. And I said to the chat that, hey, I'm a very fight and a very, very heads-on, like fight person only and not flight. So I'll take that 2-second pause to even see with the chat, quickly cross-check if you guys still watching, whoever is watching, are you still fight people? Are you flight people? And why is that? And Trivarna, you tell me as well. Are you a fight person? Are you a flight person? Fight or flight?
Yeah. And in the meantime, everybody can type in their own responses. Again, it's a very situational thing, Tanya. It really varies from situation to situation. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's not even in one's hands. There are situations that I don't want to fight and I end up fighting them. And there are situations that I want to, that I should not have flown away from, but I have nevertheless. So it's very complex and multi-layered, but it really varies from situation to situation, from person to person. It depends a lot on who I'm dealing with. So for instance, there is an emotional crisis and I know that the person opposite me is somebody that I can talk it out with, that I can confront about this, then I will possibly bring it up right there and then. But if I feel like this person will not be receptive to it or responsive to it, or will not be able to get what I'm saying and and respond at all, or it may even overwhelm them in some way, then I think I move away completely and I don't even bring it up. So it really depends on who's in front of me and what the situation is.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, because you also mentioned that sometimes people's experiences haunt you. They also challenge you. They instill a sense of fear. Doesn't always have to be negative. Like sometimes I feel like fear also pushes you in a very like that instills that sense of a drive or like an energy. Like I'm going to talk about this, and I wanted to know your opinion here as well. Like perhaps a sensitive topic. Let's say that I very often while reading literature and prose, I have Color Purple right in front of me right now by Alice Walker. And I wanted to draw some parallels here because, I was reading about her. I was reading about instances of like domestic violence and how that has been a lifelong sense of fear in her mind. Right. Vis-a-vis, give me a character where fear has sort of, changed their outlook towards life. Maybe Goldilocks, like the character that we used to see in school, right? I'm going to take very, very crude characters, or Heidi, or someone as,
Right.
as carefree as these characters, versus I'm forgetting her name in this. What is the main girl's name? And have you read Color Purple?
Of course, we had it in BA.
So, what is her name? I'm forgetting her name. Shit. Let's
I also forgot it. Yeah.
Google, because it's kind of sad of
Yeah.
me to have not known the name. 'Cause I'm
I,
literally reading the book right now.
uh, name. I love this book, by the way, and I
Yeah,
highly recommend it to everybody. Sally. Okay.
Sally, and she has a sister, and she gets married to Mr. Dash. I like that too. I like that as well. Have you? I'll take this opportunity to ask you that have there been any poems for you that have really struck you by just the way they write, right? If it has like it infused with some cultural lingo or something that's just very, very different from romantic poetry, or like those white British writers that we've quoted very often in our books. Anyone different, like anyone like from India, like Kamala Das, because you mentioned that you like her. What about her?
I mean, again, she was somebody I started reading in high school. I love Kamala Das, first of all. I started reading her in high school, and of course, we had a couple of poems of hers in BA as well,
Right,
in our and it's, I think it's the not shying away from the unpleasant aspects of the self and the vulnerable aspects. And when I say vulnerable, I also mean the not so nice aspects
right,
of the self in her writing, which is very brave. Because, when we think of, when a lot of people think of feminist writing, they think of, this completely black and white, clear image of the brave woman taking on the world.
Hmm.
And, you know, but it's not like that. Women are also incredibly, the word that we use a lot these days, gray, very multi-layered, very nuanced, very complex.
Yeah,
And I like the fact that she does not shy away from what in the self of the speaker, let me put it this way, because I think it's a stretch to also assume that the poem is the same as the poet. So it's the poem speaker is very nuanced in that sense.
Hmm.
There's this poem of hers that ends with this beautiful line called "I too call myself I," and in that particular poem, she talks about how walking and discovering the city space has largely been something that's belonged to men over many years. I'm not just talking about today's times. Today it's different. It's getting a lot better, more inclusive. But at the time that she was writing in, women couldn't just randomly leave their house at 10 in the night and walk the streets. It was
safety and just generally,
correct.
so many restrictions, so many of them.
S- but the beautiful thing is that she uses the poem as a place in which she can do that. So the poem becomes a geographical landscape in which the poet speaker can
Which one is
walk.
this? Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you. Which one is the poem that you're talking about?
It's called an introduction.
Okay. Okay, for everybody who's listening, by the way, that is a hot recommendation that you've got. An introduction by Kamala Das. Um,
Yeah.
I remember, in fact, because I had written this down as well. So, Dance of the Eunuchs was what I had penned in my little diary here. I every single stream make notes, and I'm just like, okay, have some reference point. So, I really like the fact that she's one of the most, like, I said this even before the stream, but she's the most anthologized Indian English women poets. And if I
Right.
had to break down that word, just simply talk about her work, I think it's very, very different from the white writers, female writers that we had at the time. Because obviously cultural experiences were different, right? So culturally, if you were to give us one more recommendation, because today and tonight's the night where we hear your favorite poems, talk about the ones that you really like. Are there any Indian poetesses that you have come across and have really liked, who've spoken a lot about maybe feminism or early wing feminism, has been spoken in their writings?
Sujata Bhatt,
Yep.
fantastic writer. Yeah. I mean, I love her work so much. And but there was this one poem that I must talk about of hers that really stung me. I use that word purposefully. Uh,
Yeah.
he talks about English being the colonizer's language, right?
Hmm.
And she says that because of that, there is a part of that language that is still inherently violent, not in a literal sense but in a memorial sense. Because of what? Because the language is not just a set of words. Language is also history, language is also culture, right? And she talks about the ways in which English, being the colonizer's language, has been passed down to generations and generations, suppose that, and how it's that language that we strangely grow to love. Like, you think about it, it's so ironical that love and violence are so intertwined. It's so difficult to tell. That poem raises so many important questions also, but that line about how, children come to just love a language that has been passed down to us through such violent histories really stung me and stayed with me for a very long time. The other poet that I would recommend is Eunice D'Souza. Keep cats if you want to deal with the otherness of lovers. I
Oh
mean,
my goodness, I've heard this. All right.
who can forget that line? I mean, cats are embodiments of independence and stubbornness. They come in, they go out. You never know when they're coming back. You never know when they're going to go out. And
Always
it's
need you to pet them, give them
yeah,
food, love them.
it's quite an unpredictable relationship, no, in that sense. And she uses that as an analogy for relationships at large, human relationships with one another, the
Right.
ways in which people come in and out of each other's lives without any notice. That, I think, the point that she's trying to also make there is that there's no set timeline, or there are no set rules to how relationships should be,
Yeah,
you know
for sure.
and that love is so much beyond just timeline and just labels that we impose on that particular emotion. uh, are you still here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm also reading what people have written in the chat in the meanwhile. I was checking one of these comments that Yash has mentioned, that does it ever happen to you? And I'm going to read it out. He's written that, does it ever happen to you that you've written something and people read into it way too much, put a meaning to it, which you
Yeah.
hadn't even thought of. And when you
Right.
think about it, it may actually seem true. Or do you pass it off and just be like, hey, yeah, I'm just not gonna bother about what that person said? Do you do that? Because you put a lot of things out there, right?
Correct.
And as a creator, I think it's
Correct.
it's but natural to go back to the past. It's good to learn from your mistakes, but do you overanalyze and think about these comments that you get?
So yeah, two parts. I don't over analyze, but to answer Yash's question, I think it's specific to my work because I can't speak
Right.
about reinterpreting somebody else's work, etc. So I'll stick with mine. There have been, in fact, every single time it so happens that when I put something out, people read into it in a way that I myself had never thought of it before. But for me, that's the joy of writing. Writing does not just end with me sending out that final edit of my piece into the world. That's actually the threshold. That's the beginning of its evolution. It's then what the readers bring to it that evolves that piece of work. that eventually unlayers it, opens it, tears it open completely. It was recently a fairy tale poem that I put out, and it got all sorts of comments that I hadn't even thought about. In my mind, it was not even a fairy tale poem, because I was just trying to get a lot of, dark stuff out of my head onto the page.
Right.
But there was so much. And then I went back to it and I thought, did I really even think about this while writing this piece? And I was like, it didn't even cross my, but it's beautiful that the written piece, the final piece, can become a canvas for somebody else's imagination. That's beautiful.
Yep.
That's what should happen, I think, with every piece of art. It's just where it's both the written page, it's the page is filled with words, but it's also a blank canvas for you to think about where you want to take it, or where you want the piece to take you in your own life. That's blissful. So I don't overanalyze it, but to answer Yash's question, I think it's a blissful, enriching experience when that happens, when the reader just brings their own thoughts to the text and it just becomes something else. It's wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was actually very well put. Which is your favorite fairy tale? I mean, randomly, because you mentioned fairy tale earlier on. I was keen to know.
Hansel and Gretel. I don't, the thing with fairy tales for me is, of course, Little Red Riding Hood also. But for me, I'm always trying to subvert the fairy tale. That for me is the thrill of fairy tales. Like, what if this hadn't happened? What if she hadn't gone? What if she'd actually, Cinderella, what if she'd actually turned around and flung that heel and, just, it's the what ifs that they race in they actually get me.
Yeah.
I don't even think of myself as particularly subversive, but somehow fairy tales just bring it out of me. Just
seriously.
Yeah, right? What is your favorite fairy tale?
Like rewriting of sorts. I actually like that. My favorite fairy tale, multiple actually. I really like Little Mermaid because I like the whole idea. Like now that you've mentioned retelling of a story, I've just gone into it. I've gone into that whole vibe of, hey, okay, those legs of hers, and then she wasn't very comfortable with who she was, so she tried to change herself in order to find a Prince Charming. But what if she was, what if she was the mermaid with the fins, and what if he himself donned a pair of fins and got into the sea with her to live in her world with? Nemo again is it's not a fairy tale, but a good cartoon character that I like. Dory as well.
Correct.
What else? Who else? Beauty and the Beast. I like her. I like Aurora.
Right.
She was right. But at the same time, like, don't you feel like I've seen this too often, especially fairy tales? There are very few, unless I take names like Pocahontas or maybe Mulan, there are very few fierce characters. They're all so like, they're written by men. They're written in such a fashion where we have to see these as very tame or very naive. They'll just get lost in the woods, and some Prince Charming will have to come ride on a horse and come and save her. That makes me feel really sad sometimes. Like, if you had to retell a story, which one would it be? How would you do that?
I think
like
all
a
of
feminist warrior or
like literally all of them.
right?
Yeah, I can't even think of one that I don't want to retell or rewrite. I mean, it's Angela Carter, by the way. That's another recommendation. She has a wonderful book called The Bloody Chamber. I think the title itself suggests quite a bit. It's an entire collection of fairy tales retold in the most wonderful way possible. Oh my gosh, she's so subversive, but at the same time, she's so exquisite with her language. She does it wonderfully. Just in case someone wants to delve into that. I think it would be interesting for me to also switch perspectives in fairy tales. For instance, fairy tales mostly come from a third person perspective. This was happening, this person went there. It's very observational. But say I get into the psyche of the wolf and were to tell his story. What's the wolf actually thinking? I'm very enamored by that, right? How did he even get it? is he even inherently violent? I mean, until I get into somebody's psyche, I wouldn't even know how they tick. So for me to get into the psyche of these individuals, and that's something that, by the way, we were offered a lot as a writing prompt in our writing classes, is that retell a story from the perspective of a character that usually never gets to be the center stage. Right? So the maid in the story.
Absolutely.
Someone marginal, someone you
Yeah.
wouldn't even think of as like the center of the story. Read and see what happens to the story. And the other
Like
thing that
Keki. Or no, not
right.
Keki. Keki is Dasi from Ramayana, right?
Yeah, right.
What's her name? I've completely forgotten her name. But she too was a major influence in her life. And yeah, all throughout, I mean, kept trying to change her narrative. But what if we heard it from her story, like her side of things? Because there's another quick suggestion which I'll give you, which has come in the chat for you, that you should try out fairy tales for millennials.
Fairy
That's
tales from?
for millennials. It's called Fairy Tales for Millennials. Even I haven't heard of this. I'm going to quickly Google it.
I'm going to check it out.
Awesome. Because
Yeah.
I had one quick suggestion for you as well, Trivarna, since we're talking about retelling stories and especially from a very feminist perspective. There's one I think I recommended this last stream to the chat. So it's called Birth of Kali by Anita Shivkumaran. Have you heard of this book? Have you read it by any chance?
No, but I will now. It sounds like something I would want to read. Yeah.
It's so interesting. Like all these goddesses that we see in Indian mythology, right? And Durga, Kali, Sita, they've all been given a new sense of characteristic, a new sense of confidence, and it's like a retelling of their times. And it's so interesting because Kali itself, like the name, the title, it suggests like multiple meanings. To some it's like a very dark strong woman, and to some others it's like a disaster, right? Kali agar prakat hui, they say that she's the third eye of Shiva, so
Right.
she's full of fury and anger.
Correct.
On that note, I wanted to seriously like ask you and take your opinion here. A lot of people, when they're reading feminist poetry and literature, maybe let's keep this the last topic as well, because it's so crucial, especially while reading poetry. People often label women as channelizing their angst and their anger into poetry, and which is not often a very correct reading of it. Like these words that we use for women, especially like hysteria or paranoia. Have you come across any writing of sorts where you've unnecessarily we've hyped or negated the kind of text that women have written out of goodwill and absolutely calm temperament, but we call them very very angry and like just the fact that women grabbing mic is or the pen is seen as something that's very like unheard of. What would be your take on that?
A lot of them, right? And you're right. I mean, not all of them also impose these thoughts with bad intentions. It's somehow agency is associated with anger for some reason, which is not true at all. Agency can come from a place of an almost meditative calm as well. We were discussing Plath, and the genre, even critics who've written scholarships and essays on Plath talk about her largely from this perspective of her grief, her anger. But when you deep dive into her writing enough, you realize that she's actually coming from a place of a very bold, calm assertiveness as well.
Exactly. Wow, that's such a good way of replacing a negative word with a positive word here. So
Right.
yeah, absolutely. Go
Assertive.
on.
Assertive, someone who takes ownership of who she is in her entirety, in her not so good moments, in her strong moments. It's for me, I always read Plath's poetry as a reclamation of her womanhood rather than a projection of anger or something like
Wow. Yes. Reclamation rather than a project. Yes, that should be the
that.
hashtag for the night.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so I think that there's so much. And even when we're discussing this in class, we kept a lot of people kept talking about the death drive in Plath. I'm
Hmm.
like, but look at the life drive. she's writing a poem a day. That's not death drive, that's the drive for life, if you think about it. That's actually her dynamism that's getting her to do it. So I actually look at Plath as an incredibly assertive, taking ownership of her life into her own hands, being very hands on. That's how I choose to look at her, because a lot of women get remembered, unfortunately. And that's another thing, is the way how you remember a woman also.
Yeah.
Also the tragedy queen, or oh, poor
Hmm.
thing, this happened to her, is such a wrong patriarchal misreading of the woman's life.
Right.
If you look at it, her life has been so complex and so full of so many things that go beyond just a unidimensional experience or something. And even if someone has had major phases of grief in their lives, it makes them human, not tragic.
Seriously. Yeah. I mean,
Right?
the fact that you talked about a unidimensional experience
Yeah.
and how over the course of this stream we've discovered that we've all got journeys. We've all got
Right.
different things that
Right.
just change our perception in general. Because
Right.
that itself has been so moving about her work in general. I think in the beginning too, I was talking about this, and I'm going to read out. I know we did a quick reading earlier of Plath,
Right.
and we couldn't complete that because
Right.
Mirrored was the recommendation that we got. And again, I mean, for anybody who wants to revisit their core NCERT memory, I would definitely at this point recommend, because see, my understanding of poetry only boils down to what I read in school. Trivarna here is MA in Lit, and you got to get those red hot recommendations that have already been flagged in the chat. But yeah, I mean, what I'd written here on the notebook as well was that she, in a passage of Beljar, and I'm going to read it out super quick. I'll take your opinion here as well. So she says that from the tip of every branch, like a purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked, but choosing one meant losing all of the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black. And one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet. So my understanding of it, and maybe I'll, repeat this too. But in Beljar itself, it's I think her only novel. Is that the only novel that she's written? And the rest were all I think sets of poems. But she, I think, here is just imagining like a young woman who has a very uncertain future. But I think just the fact that that universal fear that we talked about, I've written this as well, of being paralyzed by the prospect of making the right choice or not in life. Very often
Correct.
are at junctures in life where we have got to make decisions and choices. And this is where, the ultimate poem, Robert Frost, where he says that the road not taken, is it this way or is it going that way? For the audience, as a conclusionary sort of question, I might ask you this. Where is Trivarna's road going? From here on, what do you see? For yourself, for the lovely audience that you've created for yourself, who tunes into your writing very often on Instagram, on other social media. What is that road for you?
What is there? It's a lot more poems. It's a lot, because that's what also an intersection between music and poetry, because
Yep.
I love music. So I want to see what happens when you merge one with the other. Also, music is very similar to poetry in the sense that both have rhythm, both have meter, uh, and an inherent sense of like beat. So a lot of intersectional work, a lot of retellings from
Yeah.
different perspectives.
There was
um
a recommendation, in fact. I will flag this for you. Somebody, in fact, had written that you should start something like this, like a retelling, like a podcast. I'm
that'll be
not
fun.
kidding. I'm not
Yeah.
kidding. I'll be the first person sitting in all your podcasts. Like, I'll be sitting there waiting, okay, whatever time you drop. Is it because Night Owls was discussed, the fact that both of us are night
Yeah,
owls.
yeah,
If at
yeah,
11 in the night, IST, I'll be there sitting along with my of absolutely famed and cherished audience members who keep tuning in every time. We will
right,
always be there.
right.
But seriously, I mean, it's been so interesting. I wanted to ask you as well. I mean, was there anything that you wanted to ask the audience for tonight? Drop like a quick question. Like what we usually do is like I ask one words, like my fight and fight question or something like that. Did you have anything for the audience? Any recommendation? And on that note, we'll ask them as well to pitch in.
I would say someone actually posted this on Twitter. Tell me one good small thing. I think it was someone called Paul Pastor, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
I saw this. I love the idea of a good small thing because I usually associate like goodness, like, I mean, you associate them with like achievements. But I love the idea that something small in a day can turn your day completely around, you know. And I also post about this often on Instagram as well. You know, this wonderful poem by Leela called Making Tea, you know, and she talks about making tea as the sacred space in which she almost comes back to life and to her senses. And so that one small thing that kept you going today, that changed things around for you also, perhaps, I don't know. I'll just yeah
Oh my God, seriously.
yeah
Now that I think of it,
yeah
things like, I think, packing my suitcase, because I'm by the way, I'm flying to Kenya tonight,
Oh
right
wow.
after this stream. And I've got a conference to attend there. So I've got my suitcase all packed up. I'm going to take a little liberty to turn my camera around. And that's my bag all ready to go.
Nice.
But I think the biggest accomplishment for me the day felt like, just after intense nagging sessions from my parents that beta kar lo back. Can you please, can
Do
you
you
please
enjoy?
take charge of your life? Because the
Do you
fact that I still live at home and the fact that they always are a driving sense in the good way, I would say, because I've got an adjoining room. But yeah, that was that for me, just packing up my suitcase. I think it embodied that sense of, hey, keep clean, keep your mind clean,
Right.
cleanse the aura everywhere. And that's,
Correct.
I think, what showed us on the stream too. Pokraj has written something interesting. I'm going to read it out. His little good thing is that he comments on every other channel that he watches. Which is so
Nice.
It's such a nice idea, right? Even if you don't know a creator, if they're new and it's
How
just a
lovely.
journey, I really I like it too. I mean, I would personally do it. He also recommended watching feminist poetry. I'd written that down. He mentioned TED Ed, which is super cool because I even before the stream tuned into Plath and her literary works being diagnosed on TED Ed. So that was if in case you also wanted to have a look. Yeah.
Nice. I will. Well, how wonderful is that?
So what's your good thing? Like right now, what's the good thing that happened today?
Every time a bird visits my veranda,
Hmm.
I cannot do without being seen by birds. Okay, as simple as that. It's when an animal looks into, or a bird looks into your eyes.
Yeah.
It's just a different feeling altogether. Just a dog looking up at you with love, or a bird looking at you, just that, it just turns my day around. And then I'm like, I just want to be able to, I don't know, keep going. Yeah.
Wow. So you are an animal person. Because my next question would have been, hey, Trivarna, a cat person or a dog person? But you in general told us that you do like animals and all and everything.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. It's been a whole hours conversation that I've had with you today. And thank you for being so super patient. Thanks a bunch to the chat members as well who joined in, was sending active chat communications with us. Everybody who tunes in later on as well. I look forward to meeting you in person. I think that'll be a big good thing for me.
And for
on the
me,
day I meet, that'll be my good thing for the day. And exchange more good things.
Yeah, and for me as well. Yeah, it has been so wonderful speaking to you. This has been an hour just went by.
Right. It seems, I was mentally making notes. I was like, hey, the clock is ticking, but I just don't want it. It was like my Cinderella moment. I was like, just can we make 12 just seem like 3 and then we've got 3 extra hours. Just save it.
Right. But we will meet up and we will talk. Yeah.
Look forward to it. And hopefully LSR canteen will be raided when all seniors come back. We should have a reunion like that.
Oh, yes. All of us together. Yeah.
सारे ऐसे LSR वालों को हम पकड़ के हमारे जूनियर्स ने हमें अच्छा फेयरवेल नहीं दिया. मैं तो इस बात से
upset. I feel sad.
I was a COVID batch.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in. And any and every writings of Trivarna that all of you guys see as well, I would request you to go smash that like button. I feel like I'm picking up on this YouTube language, and it's so not me, and
Like,
it's
share,
just not.
subscribe.
Yeah, like, share, and then there will be like pop-ups and
I love
when the days I'm streaming with Melon, I'm told so often that, hey, there are these set of QRs that you have to follow. Oh God, I love it on Zoom because I don't have to do anything. I just have to sit physically, make some notes, and just have a chat. So I love it. But yeah, I'd love to have a stream with you sometime soon in the future. And till then, that road, wherever it takes you, I'm sure it's going to take you to the very path of success.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
How sweet. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.